I had two data points before starting the blog. A. I knew I was good at writing, and B. I knew how to bake. So, on the other side of this equation, materialized a blog about baking. That was easy, right? The name came about relatively easy too. And as with everything I do, there is a little backstory involved. When I first went to a grocery store in the United States, and it was about 12 years ago, I was shocked. Firstly, I have never seen so many fruits and vegetables available in my entire life. Mangoes, avocados, strawberries, pineapples, the abundance of fresh produce was astonishing. But the main surprise awaited me in a baking aisle. That's where my inner child went wild. There were rows of boxes that looked completely different but had one thing in common. Okay, what red velvet, pancakes, and banana bread can possibly have in common? One is red and has cocoa. One is flat or fluffy, and one is sweet and, well, has bananas in it. But in this magic of a grocery store, all of them had one thing in common, a label that read, "Just add an egg." Now, I know I can be quite dramatic, but I was totally blown away by this fact. It was not type of baking I saw at my grandmother's house, where I spent all summer breaks eating fruits from the trees or laying in the hammock at the attic. Granted, I have never seen my grandmother doing red velvet or even banana bread, because they were not staples in European family in 90s, you know. But pancakes? Pancakes what was I knew, loved and could eat all day long. In full honesty, usually I woke up to the smell of these divine fluffy rounds already waiting for me on the kitchen table, so one might argue that pancakes came from the box. But on the rare occasion when I woke up from the sunshine rays caressing my skin and chickens announcing a new day, I could see a glimpse of real magic my grandmother was doing in the kitchen, carefully measuring and sifting the flour, whisking an egg, taking time to evenly incorporate it with the fluffiest butter. There were not shortcuts with how my grandmother and mother approached baking. It was a real magic. And that was what I knew and loved and wanted to pass on to my readers. So I named the blog Bake, No Fake. Yes, it was a long story about the name of the blog. I told you, I love to tell stories. Okay, the name, the subject, that was an easy part. The not so easy part of the blog for me was photography. It's hard to believe from seeing the latest photos I took that the journey to this result was a windy one. Here is where it started. Okay, maybe to you this photo looks great, and now I also think it's not that bad. But 6 years ago, I was introduced, or should I say reintroduced, to my worst critic, my inner critic, and she said it's not good enough. Back then, I didn't have balls to say, "Listen girl, please, mind your own business and let me live my life." I took this opinion as my truth, and buried myself in photography courses I frantically bought trying to make up for my inferiority complex. And inferior I was. I went from living maybe not an ordinary but familiar life in Ukraine to a completely new environment where I was invited to the events and restaurants in San Francisco, and I didn't understand how or why it happened. Sure, maybe I snapped a couple of good photos for Instagram, but in 2016, influencer was not a widely popular term, and I definitely didn't consider myself to be the one. But I enjoyed it nonetheless. What not to enjoy when you have an opportunity to go inside the company you adore and religiously use to save the latest ideas and inspiration? Or got invited to the Portuguese restaurant for brunch? Or go to a charming winery in Napa for a private cooking class and wine tasting. There was one thing I didn't enjoy though. Sometimes at these events, bloggers were talking about the number of followers they had or brand deals they got. I didn't know what bothered me the most, that in my opinion such things removed the art from creative work we were doing, or that I couldn't got these deals myself, because my visa type still didn't allow me to do any type of work in exchange for the money. And I might brushed it off as a joke that I didn't need to work and I had a lot of stuff on my plate to keep myself occupied. But the looming reality was that I was affected and creeping thoughts started to settle in my head. We'll go back to the events later, especially one, the pivotal one. But I just want to say here that, to my credit, going to the events was not the only thing that I was doing. I was also volunteering. At the time we lived next to a bay bridge, and there was and still is a famous farmers market in a ferry building. One day on a whim I signed up for their culinary program, and every Sunday, alongside with other volunteers, I helped chefs from different restaurants in the city to prepare demos for the guests. Some days it was shopping at the market for produce, some days chopping a bunch of unknown to me citrus fruits and making juice out of them, and some days doing dishes. I cannot say that I particularly enjoy doing dishes part, but I definitely like the idea of putting my time to a good use. So much so that when the director of culinary program, Christine, sent out an email saying that we could participate in a fundraising event and then run half marathon on behalf of the market, I immediately jumped in. I didn't think. Because as it turned out, each participant had to raise $800. And to me, in 2016, when I was only 6 months in a new city, it was a lot of money. Of course, I posted on Facebook letting all of my friends know and asking for their donations, but still, it wasn't even half of the money that I needed. And then I got an idea. What if I can offer something in return? Something small and sweet as my thank you. I turned to my trusty friend baking, and that's where the donations started to pour in. I created a box of small pastries and wrote a post on Nextdoor telling my story. In that post I said that for every $25 donation they would receive a box of small treats. And I think I even went even more ambitious and said that for every $50 donation I would bake a whole cake. Nextdoor is like an online bulletin board for neighbors, so I knew I didn't have to go to the end of the city to deliver the boxes. The funny thing was that at the end I didn't have to make them. People were so intrigued by this idea that they started to donate in large amounts. But when I messaged them asking for what type of cake do you want me to make, they usually replied that it wasn't necessary and my care for fundraising was enough. I persisted with my messages because I really wanted to thank these people for their generosity. But in that, I also realized that maybe it wasn't incentivizing to eat food made on a stranger's kitchen, and the idea in itself was complete. When I ran 21 kilometers on the foggy morning in July of 2016, I was a bundle of joy, knowing that together we made it. Another thing that we made was collaborations. Usually I prefer to work by myself, but these creative photoshoots really opened me up to the idea that power is in the groups. The first photoshoot I did was with my friend Ronnie. She has an eye for styling, all things beautiful and aesthetic, and so for the next Halloween we created a moody scene that incorporated a brand of chips we loved and my pumpkin macarons. The next project I participated in was kind of big. It was a ballet photo shoot with real ballerinas, and my part again was to bring sweets. I ended up making macarons that matched the color theme of the shoot, and the tall, elegant cake decorated with pink meringues and specks of edible gold. Yes, there is gold that you can actually eat. I think I was in macarons phase at that time because the third collaborative photoshoot I did also involved, you guessed it, macarons. My friend Ashley is a gifted mixologist, and she got an idea for Valentine's Day to create macarons and cocktails pairings. She made 3 classic cocktails, old-fashioned, piña colada and margarita, and I turned them out into sweets. As you can see on Ashley's photos, it was a success. But you know what? Even though I took a million photos myself, I have never ended up editing them, because I thought that mine were not good enough. Speaking of not being enough, I think it's time for us to go to a pivotal story. But buckle up, because we are going on adventure. And I literally mean going and adventure. Remember Anna, who introduced me to the blogging community? She got invited to the event she couldn't attend herself, and so she asked me if I could go instead of her and then write about it in her online publication. I half readily agreed. Half readily because honestly it was a big ask. The event was held in the Redwoods, 3.5 hours drive away from San Francisco. It was 2 days and 1 night event, and among 500 attendees, the only living soul I knew was myself. But I like adventure, and so I replied with reassuring yes. The first sign that it would be a pivotal story presented itself even before I arrived to the event. Since it was held so far away, we were asked to carpool to the Redwoods from the city. And as it usually goes, at least here in San Francisco, the first question you ask and got asked is, "What do you do?" And so, when the driver of the car introduced himself as head of marketing at Airbnb, my jaw dropped, and I knew it would be a ride of my life. Now, I briefly mentioned that inability to work in the States did wonders to my self-esteem, but at that point of my journey, I was slowly approaching a rock bottom, or at least I thought so. The event was breathtaking though. Outpost is one half trade show and one half summer camp, where brands can present their products in a natural environment and buyers can test drive them and basically have fun doing so. And fun it was. The experiences ranged from redwood climbing to making kombucha, back to touring an Airstream and learning how to operate the drone. It was truly one-of-a-kind experience, and for me, even more so each time I had to introduce myself. I'm a blogger and photographer, but I'm not like a real blogger and photographer because I don't make any money out of it, because I cannot work in the United States, because my visa type doesn't allow me to do so, but in the past I work in tech. After I repeated this speech 17 times to 17 different people who were in my mind on top of their professional game, and here we're speaking Director of Communication at Ford, PR at Merrill, and my favorite, an investor who came here to find next brands he wants to invest in. In that moment, my level of self-worth dropped to the level I have never experienced before, and I spent the rest of the evening in my tiny cabin in the woods, basically counting the hours till the moment I can go home and be relieved from such torture. Ironically, my ride back was with that investor. When I returned back home and finished an article I promised to Anna, I knew that my blogging days were coming to an end. And that's how I met my existential crisis.